The snowstorm came out of nowhere on Christmas Eve, 1877, and Daniel Norton figured it would probably be the thing that finally killed him, which seemed about right for how his life had been going. He had been riding through the Wyoming Territory for 3 days straight, trying to make it from Cheyenne to Laramie before the holiday, though he did not have anyone waiting for him in either place. The wind howled across the open plains, cutting through his heavy coat like it was made of paper, and his horse whinnied nervously as the snow fell harder and faster. Daniel pulled his scarf up over his nose and squinted against the white wall of precipitation, barely able to see 5 feet in front of him. He was about to seek shelter under a rocky outcropping when he saw something dark against the endless white. At first he thought it might be a fallen tree or maybe a dead animal, but as he urged his horse closer, his heart nearly stopped. It was a woman, curled up on her side in the snow, wearing nothing but a thin dress that had probably been nice before it got torn and stained. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and for a terrible moment Daniel thought she was already dead. He dismounted so fast he nearly fell, his legs stiff from hours in the saddle. When he knelt beside her and pressed his fingers to her neck, he felt a pulse, faint but steady. Her skin was ice cold, her lips tinged blue, and she was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering even though she did not seem conscious. "Madam," Daniel said, patting her cheek gently. "Madam, can you hear me?" She did not respond, but her eyelids fluttered slightly. That was enough for Daniel. He had lost too many people in his life to sit by and watch another one slip away, especially not on Christmas Eve, especially not when he could do something about it. His cabin was only about 2 miles north, built on land he had claimed a year ago when he decided he was tired of drifting from town to town with nothing to show for it but scars and bad memories. It was not much, just 4 walls and a roof, but it had a fireplace and it was warm, and right now that was all that mattered. Daniel scooped the woman up as gently as he could. She was light, too light, like she had not eaten properly in weeks. He settled her in front of him on his horse, keeping one arm wrapped tightly around her waist to hold her upright. She slumped against his chest, still unconscious, and he could feel how violently she was shaking. "Stay with me," he murmured, even though he knew she probably could not hear him. "Just stay with me a little longer." The ride to his cabin felt like it took hours instead of the usual 30 minutes. The storm was getting worse, the wind so strong it nearly knocked them sideways more than once. Daniel kept talking to the woman, telling her about the fire he was going to build, the blankets he had, the hot coffee that would warm her from the inside out. He did not know if his words made any difference, but it felt better than riding in silence. When the dark shape of his cabin finally emerged from the snowstorm, Daniel nearly wept with relief. He dismounted carefully, pulling the woman down with him, and kicked the door open. The inside of the cabin was cold since he had been gone for days, but it was still warmer than being outside. He laid the woman on his bed, which was really just a straw mattress covered with a couple of wool blankets, and immediately set about building a fire. His hands shook as he struck the flint, whether from cold or fear or both he could not say. The kindling caught on the 3rd try, and he fed the small flame carefully until it grew into a proper fire. Heat began to radiate into the small space, and Daniel turned his attention back to the woman. Her dress was soaked through, and he knew she needed to get out of it before the wet fabric made her condition worse. Daniel hesitated, feeling awkward and intrusive, but logic won out over propriety. He found one of his shirts, the cleanest one he had, and turned away as he carefully removed her wet dress and replaced it with his dry shirt. It hung on her like a tent, but at least it was warm and dry. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, tucking them around her tightly. Her shivering seemed to ease slightly as she began to warm up, but she still had not opened her eyes or shown any sign of real consciousness. Daniel sat beside the bed, watching her carefully, wondering who she was and how in God's name she had ended up alone in the middle of a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. She was pretty. He could see that even with her face pale and drawn. She looked young, maybe early 20s, with delicate features and long dark lashes that rested against her cheeks. There was a bruise on her jaw that made Daniel's hands curl into fists, and he noticed other marks on her arms, some fresh and some fading. Someone had hurt her. Someone had hurt her and left her to die in the snow. The rage that welled up inside Daniel was hot and fierce, but he pushed it down. Right now, the woman needed care, not vengeance. There would be time to figure out what happened later, assuming she survived the night. He put a pot of snow on the fire to melt for water and found the last of his coffee beans. While the water heated, he took care of his horse, bringing the animal into the small lean-to attached to the side of the cabin and rubbing him down before giving him feed. When he came back inside, the woman was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed steadier. Daniel made coffee, strong and black, and carefully lifted the woman's head, trying to get her to take a sip. Most of it ran down her chin, but she swallowed a little, and he counted that as a victory. He repeated the process several times over the next hour, talking to her softly the whole time. "My name is Daniel," he said. "Daniel Norton. This is my cabin and you are safe here. I do not know what happened to you or who hurt you, but you are safe now. I promise." As night fell and the storm continued to rage outside, Daniel kept vigil beside the bed. He added wood to the fire, made more coffee, and watched the woman's face for any sign of change. Around midnight, her eyes finally opened. They were blue, he noticed, a deep blue like the sky right before sunset. She stared at him with confusion and fear, her body tensing as if preparing to run. "It is all right," Daniel said quickly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You are safe. I found you in the snow and brought you here. My name is Daniel. You are in my cabin about 10 miles outside of Laramie." The woman's eyes darted around the small space, taking in the rough log walls, the crackling fire, the single window showing nothing but swirling snow outside. Her gaze came back to Daniel, still wary but less panicked. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough and raspy. "I do not remember." "Do not remember what?" Daniel asked gently. "Anything. I do not remember." She lifted a shaking hand to her head, pressing her fingers to her temple. "My name. I do not remember my name." Daniel felt his stomach drop. He had heard of people losing their memories after trauma, but he had never encountered it himself. "What do you remember?" The woman closed her eyes, her forehead creasing with concentration. "Running. I remember running. And cold and someone." She shuddered and a tear slipped down her cheek. Someone was angry, so angry. Daniel reached out slowly and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Her fingers were still cold despite the fire and blankets. "You do not have to remember right now. You need to rest and get your strength back. The rest will come in time." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "Why did you help me?" The question caught him off guard. "Why? Because you needed help. Because leaving someone to die in a snowstorm is not something I could live with. You do not know me." "Does not matter," Daniel said firmly. "You are a human being in trouble. That is all I need to know." Fresh tears welled up in her eyes and she turned her face away, but she did not pull her hand from his. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are welcome," Daniel said. He released her hand and stood up, moving to the small table where he kept his meager supplies. "Are you hungry?" "I do not have much, but I can make you something." "I do not think I can eat," she admitted. "My stomach feels strange." "How about more coffee then? Or water would be good. Daniel poured her a cup of the melted snow water which had cooled enough to drink. He helped her sit up slightly, supporting her with one arm while she sipped slowly. Some color was returning to her face and her hands did not shake quite as badly. "What day is it?" she asked after she finished the water. "Christmas Eve," Daniel told her. "Well, Christmas Day now, I suppose, since it is past midnight." She looked at him with such sadness that it made his chest ache. "I ruined your Christmas." Daniel actually laughed at that, a short, bitter sound. "You did not ruin anything. I was not planning on celebrating anyway. Christmas has not meant much to me for a long time." "Why not?" He hesitated, unused to talking about himself, especially to strangers. But something about her eyes, about the vulnerability in them, made him want to be honest. "My family is all gone. Parents died of fever when I was 15. My brother was killed in the war, my wife." He paused, the old pain still sharp even after 3 years. "My wife died in childbirth along with our baby. That was in 74. I have been on my own since then." "I am sorry," she said softly. "That is too much loss for one person." "Life is not fair," Daniel said with a shrug, trying to sound more casual than he felt. "But we keep going anyway. What else can we do?" She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "If I cannot remember my name, what should I be called?" Daniel thought about it. "Well, I suppose you could pick a name you like, or I could call you something temporary until your memory comes back. What would you call me?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and the first thing that came to mind was how he had found her in the snow, how fragile and precious she had seemed, like something beautiful that the world was trying to destroy. "Bella," he said without thinking. "I would call you Bella." She smiled for the first time, just a tiny upturn of her lips, but it transformed her whole face. "Bella, I like that." "Bella it is then," Daniel said, feeling something warm and unfamiliar bloom in his chest. "Now, Bella, you need to rest. You have been through an ordeal and your body needs time to heal." She nodded and let him help her lie back down. He tucked the blankets around her again, and she closed her eyes, already drifting back towards sleep. Daniel settled into his chair by the fire, watching her breathe, and realized that for the first time in 3 years, he did not feel quite so alone. The storm raged for 2 more days, making it impossible to travel into Laramie or anywhere else. Daniel did not mind. He had enough supplies to last them a while, and he found himself enjoying the company more than he expected. Bella's memory did not return, but she grew stronger each day, able to sit up on her own, to walk around the small cabin, to help with simple tasks like preparing meals. They talked a lot during those days. Daniel told her about his life, about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about fighting in the war even though he was barely old enough, about drifting west after his wife died because he could not stand to be in the same place that held so many memories. Bella listened intently, asking questions, seeming genuinely interested in his stories. She told him what little she could remember, which was not much. She thought she might have been traveling with someone, maybe in a wagon or a coach, but the details were fuzzy. She remembered fear, constant fear and hunger and cold. When she tried to push deeper into those memories, her head would start to ache and she would have to stop. "Maybe it is better not to remember," she said on the morning of December 27th, standing by the window and looking out at the snow-covered landscape. The storm had finally passed, leaving everything white and pristine. Maybe some things are meant to stay forgotten. Daniel came to stand beside her, close enough that he could smell the soap she had used to wash her hair in the basin that morning. She had insisted on cleaning up, on not being a burden, and he had given her privacy while she bathed and dressed in another one of his shirts. This one tucked into a pair of his pants that she had to roll up at the ankles and tie tight around her waist. Your memory might come back whether you want it to or not, Daniel said carefully. But whatever is in your past, it does not have to define your future. She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how blue her eyes were, how they seemed to see right through him. What if I did something terrible? What if I am running from the law, are you? Daniel asked. I do not know. I do not think so, but how can I be sure? I am sure, Daniel said firmly. I have known plenty of bad people in my life, and you are not one of them. I would stake my life on it. You barely know me. I know enough. He reached out and touched her shoulder, a brief, reassuring contact. You have a good heart, Bella. I can see it in everything you do, the way you thank me for every little thing, the way you try so hard not to be a burden even though you are recovering from God knows what. Bad people do not act like that. She looked like she wanted to believe him but could not quite manage it. What happens when the snow melts enough for travel? Daniel had been thinking about that question himself. The right thing to do would be to take her into Laramie, to ask around and see if anyone knew who she was or where she came from. But the thought of letting her go, of sending her back into a world that had clearly hurt her, made him feel sick. I suppose we should go into town and see if anyone knows you, he said slowly. But if they do not, or if you do not want to be found by whoever you were running from, then you are welcome to stay here as long as you like. Here, she looked around the small cabin doubtfully. I cannot just move in with you. People will talk. Let them talk, Daniel said, surprised by his own vehemence. I do not give a damn what people think. You need a safe place to stay, and I have one. That is all that matters. Bella bit her lip, clearly conflicted. You have already done so much for me. I cannot ask you to do more. You are not asking. I am offering. Daniel took a breath, trying to find the right words. Look, I know this is strange. We just met a few days ago under the worst possible circumstances. But I have been alone in this cabin for a year now, and having you here has reminded me what it is like to have someone to talk to, someone to care about. I am not ready to give that up yet, not unless you want to leave. I do not want to leave, Bella admitted quietly. I feel safe here. I have not felt safe in, I do not know how long. Then stay, Daniel said simply. Stay as long as you need to. She nodded, relief evident on her face, and Daniel felt that warm feeling in his chest again, stronger this time. He was not foolish enough to think this was anything more than two lonely people finding comfort in each other's company, but that was enough. For now, that was more than enough. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Daniel taught Bella how to make coffee the way he liked it, strong enough to strip paint, and she taught herself how to cook using his limited supplies, turning beans and salt pork into meals that were actually edible. They talked while they worked, sharing stories and opinions, debating everything from politics to religion to the best way to break in a new pair of boots. Daniel found himself looking forward to waking up each morning, knowing Bella would be there. She had started sleeping on a pallet by the fire, insisting that he take the bed since it was his cabin, but often he would wake in the night and find her sitting up, staring into the dying embers with a look of such sadness that it made his heart hurt. One night in early January, Daniel woke to the sound of crying. Bella was curled up on her pallet, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He got out of bed and knelt beside her without thinking, putting a hand on her back. Bella, what is wrong? She looked up at him, her face wet with tears, and choked out, I remembered something. Daniel's stomach clenched. What did you remember, my real name? She whispered. It is Beatrice, Beatrice Davies, and I was running from my husband. The word husband hit Daniel like a physical blow, but he pushed his own feelings aside and focused on her. Tell me what happened. Beatrice took a shuddering breath. We were married last year. He seemed kind at first, but after the wedding he changed. He would get angry over nothing and he would hit me. I tried to leave once, but he found me and dragged me back, and it was worse after that. He said if I ever tried to leave again, he would kill me. Daniel felt rage building inside him, hot and fierce. Where is he now? I do not know. We were traveling to his brother's ranch near Cheyenne for Christmas. We stopped to make camp, and he started drinking, and he got so angry about something, I do not even know what. He beat me so badly I thought he was going to kill me right then. But then he passed out and I ran. I just ran and kept running until I could not run anymore. That is when I found you, Daniel said softly. Beatrice nodded, wiping at her tears. I should have told you I might be married. I should have been honest. You did not remember, Daniel pointed out. And even if you had, it would not have changed anything. I still would have helped you. But I am married, Beatrice said miserably. In the eyes of God and the law, I belong to him. You do not belong to anyone, Daniel said fiercely. You are a person, not property. And any man who would beat his wife like that does not deserve to call himself a husband. The law would not see it that way. Daniel knew she was right. Women had few rights when it came to marriage, and a husband was allowed to discipline his wife however he saw fit. It was wrong, deeply wrong, but it was the reality they lived in. Then we will not involve the law, Daniel said. You stay here with me where you are safe, and if your husband comes looking for you, he will have to go through me to get to you. Beatrice looked at him with those blue eyes, and he saw hope and fear and something else, something he did not dare name. You would do that. You would protect me from him. Yes, Daniel said without hesitation. I will. She threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly, and Daniel held her, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. He rubbed her back gently, making soothing sounds, and gradually her crying subsided. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. Thank you, Daniel. You do not have to thank me, he said, but he did not let go of her, and she did not pull away. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other by the dying fire, and Daniel realized with a start that he was falling in love with her. It was too soon, too fast, too complicated, but his heart did not seem to care about any of that. He loved the way she smiled when she got his coffee right, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. He loved her strength, her resilience, her kindness despite everything she had been through. He could not tell her, of course. She was still legally married, still traumatized from what her husband had done to her. The last thing she needed was another man making demands on her, even emotional ones. So Daniel kept his feelings to himself and focused on being what she needed. A friend, a protector, a safe harbor in a dangerous world. January turned into February, and the snow began to melt. Beatrice's bruises faded, and she started to smile more often, even laugh sometimes. She proved to have a sharp wit and a talent for seeing the absurdity in everyday situations, and Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in years. They went into Laramie together in late February, both of them nervous about what they might find. Daniel bought supplies while Beatrice stayed close to his side, her eyes darting nervously at every stranger they passed. No one seemed to recognize her, and when Daniel casually asked the shopkeeper if he had heard of anyone looking for a missing woman, the man said no. Guess your husband does not care enough to search for you, Daniel said as they rode back to the cabin. Or he thinks I am dead, Beatrice suggested. If he woke up and I was gone and there was a snowstorm, he probably assumed I froze to death. Would that be better or worse? Daniel asked. Beatrice thought about it. Better, I think. If he believes I am dead, he will not come looking for me. Then let him think you are dead, Daniel said. You can start a new life, be whoever you want to be. I want to be Bella, she said quietly. Beatrice was his wife. Bella is the person you saved. I like being Bella. Then Bella it is, Daniel agreed, feeling warmth spread through his chest. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, but when it finally arrived, it transformed the landscape from white to green almost overnight. Beatrice planted a garden behind the cabin, coaxing vegetables from the hard earth with a patience and skill that impressed Daniel. She also started fixing up the cabin, making curtains from an old blanket, scrubbing the floors until they shone, turning the rough bachelor quarters into something that felt like a real home. Daniel watched her bloom along with the garden, watched her grow confident and happy, and his love for her grew stronger every day. He still had not told her how he felt, but he caught her looking at him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. One evening in May, they were sitting outside watching the sunset, a ritual they had developed over the past few weeks. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, and the air was warm and sweet with the smell of growing things. "Daniel," Beatrice said, her voice hesitant. "Yeah." "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Do you ever think about getting married again? Having a family?" The question caught him off guard, and his heart started beating faster. "I used to think I would never want that again. After losing Sarah and the baby, I thought it would hurt too much to try again." "And now?" Beatrice asked softly. "Now I think maybe I was wrong," Daniel admitted. "I think maybe the right person could make it worth the risk." Beatrice turned to look at him, and in the golden light of the setting sun, she was so beautiful it made his throat tight. "Have you found the right person?" Daniel knew this was it, the moment where he either told her the truth or lost his chance forever. He took a deep breath and took the leap. "Yes," he said. "I have. I love you, Bella. I have loved you for months now, but I did not want to say anything because I did not want to make you uncomfortable or feel pressured. You have been through so much, and you deserve to have time to heal without someone pushing their feelings on you. But you asked, and I cannot lie to you, I love you." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, the biggest smile he had ever seen on her face. "Oh, Daniel, I love you too. I have loved you since Christmas Day, when I woke up, and you were there taking care of me like I mattered, like I was worth saving. I was so afraid to tell you because I thought you might still be in love with your wife, or that you would think I was just grateful and confusing that with love, or that you would reject me because I am still technically married to another man. I will always care about Sarah," Daniel said honestly. "But she is gone, and you are here, and my heart knows the difference. And as for your husband, as far as I am concerned, any marriage that involved him beating you is not valid in any way that matters. You are free, Bella. You are free to choose your own life, your own future, your own love." "I choose you," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. "I choose you, Daniel Norton, today and every day for the rest of my life." Daniel pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like coming home, like finding something precious he had thought was lost forever. She kissed him back with a passion that surprised and delighted him, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed close against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "We should get married. Properly, I mean. I know you are still legally married to him, but there are plenty of preachers out here who do not ask too many questions. We could go to a different town, use different names if we have to. I want to make this official, make you my wife in every way." "Yes," Beatrice said without hesitation. "Yes, I want that too. I want to be your wife, to build a life with you, to have a future that is ours and no one else's." They made plans over the next few days. They would go to a town called Rawlins, about 100 miles west, where no one knew them. Beatrice would be Bella Davis, a widow, and Daniel would be himself. They would get married by whatever preacher or justice of the peace they could find. and then they would come home and start their life together properly. The journey to Rawlins took 4 days, and they made it an adventure, camping under the stars and talking late into the night about their hopes and dreams for the future. Beatrice wanted children, at least 2 or 3, and a bigger house with real glass windows. Daniel wanted to expand his land, maybe raise cattle or horses, build something lasting that they could pass down to their children. They found a preacher in Rawlins who agreed to marry them for $5 and did not ask any awkward questions. The ceremony was simple, just the 2 of them and the preacher and his wife as a witness. But when Daniel slipped a simple gold band onto Beatrice's finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his life, he meant every word with all his heart. That night, in a small room at the town's only hotel, they consummated their marriage. Daniel was gentle and patient, mindful of Beatrice's past trauma, and she responded to his tenderness with a passion that took his breath away. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, bringing each other pleasure that was as much emotional as physical. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Beatrice said, "I never knew it could be like that. I never knew it could feel good, that it could be about love instead of just duty or pain." "It will always be about love with us," Daniel promised, kissing her forehead. "Always." They returned to the cabin as husband and wife, and over the next few months they built their life together. Daniel expanded the cabin, adding another room and a proper kitchen. Beatrice's garden flourished, and she started selling vegetables in Laramie, earning money that they saved toward buying more land. In September, Beatrice told Daniel she was pregnant. He was terrified and overjoyed in equal measure, remembering all too well what had happened with Sarah. But Beatrice assured him that she was healthy and strong and that everything would be fine. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Beatrice bloomed with health. She laughed at Daniel's overprotectiveness, insisting that she was not made of glass and could still do her normal work, though she let him take over the heavier tasks without complaint. In the spring of 1879, Beatrice went into labor. Daniel rode into Laramie at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor, a kind older man named Dr. Harrison, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, and Daniel spent every minute of it in an agony of fear, holding Beatrice's hand and praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. But when he heard the sharp, angry cry of a baby and doctor, Harrison said, "It is a boy, Mr. Norton, a healthy baby boy." Daniel felt tears streaming down his face. Beatrice was exhausted but beaming as the doctor placed their son in her arms, and Daniel sat beside her on the bed, marveling at the tiny, perfect human they had created together. "He is beautiful," Beatrice whispered. "He looks like you," Daniel said, touching one tiny hand and feeling his heart expand in a way he had not thought possible. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. Daniel thought about it. "What about James, after my brother?" "James Norton," Beatrice said, testing out the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, James." James was a healthy, happy baby who rarely cried and slept well from the start. Daniel was a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings even though Beatrice nursed, just so he could sit with her and watch their son eat. He changed diapers and gave baths and walked the floor when James was fussy, and he loved every minute of it. When James was 6 months old, Beatrice found out she was pregnant again. She and Daniel both laughed when the doctor confirmed it, amazed at how quickly their family was growing. "I hope it is a girl this time," Beatrice said. "A little girl would be perfect." Their second child was indeed a girl, born in the summer of 1880. The labor was shorter this time, and when Daniel heard his daughter's first cry, He felt the same overwhelming rush of love he had felt with James. They named her Elizabeth, after Beatrice's mother, and she had her mother's blue eyes and a temperament that was already showing signs of being stubborn and independent. Life settled into a happy rhythm. Daniel's land prospered, and he was able to buy more acreage and start a small herd of cattle. Beatrice was busy with the children and the garden and the house, but she seemed to thrive on the work, her face always glowing with contentment. James grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father everywhere, asking a million questions and getting into everything. Elizabeth was quieter, more observant, but she had a smile that could light up a room and a laugh that sounded like music. One evening in the fall of 1881, after the children were in bed, Daniel and Beatrice sat outside watching the sunset like they had that first night when they confessed their love for each other. Beatrice was pregnant again, just beginning to show, and Daniel had his hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had not found you that night?" Daniel asked. "I would have died," Beatrice said simply. "I would have frozen to death in the snow, and none of this would exist. James and Elizabeth would not exist. It is strange to think about." "I do not like thinking about it," Daniel admitted. "I do not like imagining a world without you in it." "Then do not," Beatrice said, leaning against his shoulder. "I am here and I am not going anywhere. You saved me, Daniel, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me a home and a holiday when I had nothing, and you gave me a life worth living. I love you more than I can possibly say." "I love you too," Daniel said, kissing the top of her head. "You and our children are everything to me. You are my whole world." Their third child was another boy, born in the spring of 1882. They named him Thomas, and he had Daniel's dark hair and Beatrice's blue eyes. He was a peaceful baby who seemed content just to observe the world around him, and James and Elizabeth both adored their little brother. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The children grew healthy and strong, the ranch prospered, and Daniel and Beatrice's love for each other only deepened with time. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts and hard winters, illnesses and injuries, disagreements and difficult days. But they faced everything together, and their partnership was strong enough to weather any storm. When James turned 10, Daniel started teaching him how to work with cattle and horses. James took to it naturally, and Daniel felt a fierce pride watching his son learn the skills that would one day allow him to run the ranch himself. Elizabeth showed more interest in books than ranching, and Daniel made sure to buy her every book he could find, encouraging her curious mind. Thomas, at 8 years old, was still figuring out where his interests lay, but he was a hard worker and eager to please. Beatrice sometimes worried that her past would catch up with them, that her first husband would somehow discover she was alive and come to reclaim her. But as the years went by and nothing happened, that fear gradually faded. She had been with Daniel longer than she had ever been with her first husband, and the woman she had been when she was married to him felt like a stranger, someone from a different life entirely. In 1887, they celebrated their 10th anniversary. Beatrice was 42 now, and Daniel was 45, and they had been through so much together that they could hardly remember what life had been like before they found each other. "I was thinking," Beatrice said as they sat on the porch that had become their favorite spot for important conversations, "that maybe we should tell the children the truth about how we met. They are old enough now to understand." "What brought this on?" Daniel asked. "James asked me the other day why we did not have any pictures from our wedding," Beatrice explained. "I made up some excuse about not having money for a photographer, but I do not like lying to them. They deserve to know the truth." Daniel thought about it. "You are right. but we should be careful how we tell it. We do not want to frighten them." That evening, they gathered the children together and told them the story. They explained about the Christmas Eve snowstorm, about finding Beatrice alone and nearly frozen, about the choice to start a new life together. They did not go into detail about Beatrice's first husband or the abuse she had suffered, just said that she had been in a bad situation, and Daniel had helped her escape. The children listened with wide eyes, and when the story was finished, Elizabeth said, "So you saved Mama's life." "I suppose I did," Daniel said. "And then you fell in love and got married and had us," James added. "That is right," Beatrice confirmed. "That is the best story I ever heard," Thomas declared, and his siblings nodded in agreement. After the children went to bed, Beatrice said to Daniel, "I was worried they might think less of me, knowing that I was running away, that I was married before." "They love you," Daniel said simply. "Nothing could change that. And they understand that sometimes people have to run from bad situations. They are smart kids, Bella. They get it." As their children grew older and started their own lives, Daniel and Beatrice became pillars of the community around Laramie. They were known for their generosity, their strong marriage, and their well-run ranch. People came to them for advice, for help, for loans when times were tough. Daniel served on the town council for several years, and Beatrice started a school for the children who lived too far out to attend the one in town. In 1895, when James was 26, he married a lovely young woman named Catherine and announced that he and his new wife would be taking over the ranch, allowing Daniel and Beatrice to retire if they wanted. "Retire to what?" Beatrice asked, laughing. "This is our home. We are not going anywhere." But they did step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, spending more time together, traveling occasionally, enjoying the slower pace. Elizabeth had moved to Denver and was working as a teacher, something she loved. Thomas had surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer and setting up practice in Cheyenne. Daniel and Beatrice were proud of all their children, proud of the good people they had become, proud of the lives they had built for themselves. One evening in December of 1900, Daniel and Beatrice sat on their porch wrapped in blankets, watching the snow fall. It was almost Christmas, 23 years since that fateful night when Daniel had found Beatrice in the storm. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not found you?" Daniel asked. "No," Beatrice said firmly. "Because I did not have a life before you found me. I was just existing, just surviving. You gave me a life, Daniel. You gave me love and family and purpose and joy. Everything good in my world started that Christmas Eve when you brought me to this cabin and promised I would be safe." "I kept that promise," Daniel said. "You did," Beatrice agreed, taking his hand. "You kept every promise you ever made to me. You are the best man I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you were the one riding through that storm." "I thank God too," Daniel said, pulling her close. "I was so lonely before I found you. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, and I had made my peace with that. But then there you were, and everything changed. You gave me a reason to live again, Bella. You gave me hope and love and a family. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall and holding each other close. Inside the house, they could hear Catherine moving around, preparing dinner, and the sounds of their grandchildren playing. The ranch was thriving under James's management. Their children were all happy and successful, and Daniel and Beatrice had decades of love and memories between them. "Merry Christmas, Daniel," Beatrice said softly. "Merry Christmas, Bella," Daniel replied, kissing her gently. The snow continued to fall, soft and white and peaceful, covering the world in a blanket of purity. But inside the cabin, by the fire that still burned in the same fireplace where Daniel had first warmed Beatrice back to life all those years ago. Everything was warm and bright and full of love. They stayed on the ranch for many more years, growing old together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. Daniel's hair turned white, and his hands grew gnarled with arthritis, but his love for Beatrice never dimmed. Beatrice's face gained lines and her step slowed, but her eyes remained the same brilliant blue that had captivated Daniel that first Christmas morning. In 1910, when Daniel was 68 and Beatrice was 65, they celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. All three of their children came home for the occasion, bringing their families, and the house was full of noise and laughter and love. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Daniel and Beatrice sat on their porch one last time, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring air. "We have had a good life," Beatrice said. "The best life," Daniel agreed. "No regrets." "Not a single one," Beatrice said firmly. "Every choice I made, every path I took, led me to you and to this life we built together. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same way," Daniel said. "Even the hard times, even the losses and the struggles, they were all worth it because I got to go through them with you by my side." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the night, the crickets chirping and the wind rustling through the trees. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light over the land they had worked so hard to build into something meaningful. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Beatrice asked. "When I woke up and I was so confused and frightened." "I said a lot of things that night," Daniel replied. "You said I was safe," Beatrice reminded him. "You promised me I was safe and that you would protect me. And you did, Daniel. For 33 years you kept me safe. You gave me a home and a holiday and a life. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a reason to keep going when I thought I had none. You gave me love and family and purpose. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Bella, maybe more." They held each other close, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life full of light. Daniel Norton passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1915, at the age of 73. He had been working on the ranch right up until the end, still strong and capable despite his years. Beatrice held his hand as he took his last breath, and she told him she loved him one final time. Beatrice lived for 3 more years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, telling them stories about Daniel and the life they had built together. She never stopped wearing the simple gold wedding band he had given her in Rawlins all those years ago. She died in the spring of 1918, at the age of 73, the same age Daniel had been when he passed. She died in her sleep, in the bed where all 3 of her children had been born, in the cabin that Daniel had built with his own hands, and that had been expanded and improved over the years, but had never lost its essential character as the place where 2 lost souls had found each other. When they buried Beatrice next to Daniel in the small cemetery on the ranch, all 3 of their children were there, along with numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The family that had started with one lonely cowboy finding one desperate woman in a snowstorm had grown into something remarkable, a legacy of love and strength and resilience. James Norton, now 59 years old and still running the ranch with the help of his own children, stood at his parents' graves and thought about the story he had heard so many times growing up. How his father had been riding through a Christmas Eve snowstorm and found his mother nearly frozen to death. How he had brought her to his cabin and cared for her, how they had fallen in love, how they had built a life together against all odds. It was a story about second chances and unexpected blessings, about choosing love over loneliness and hope over despair. It was a story that had shaped James's entire life, that had taught him what real love looked like, what real commitment meant. As he placed flowers on both graves, James made a silent promise to his parents. He would keep the ranch going, keep it in the family, keep alive the legacy they had built. He would tell his children and grandchildren the story of how Daniel found Beatrice in the snow, how he gave her a home and a holiday, how their love had created all of this. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, and for just a moment, James could have sworn he heard his mother's laugh, that bright, joyful sound that had filled their home for as long as he could remember. He smiled, knowing that wherever his parents were now, they were together, and they were happy. The Norton Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passing from James to his children and then to their children. The story of Daniel and Beatrice became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations, a reminder of where they all came from and the values they were meant to uphold. The original cabin, where Daniel had first brought Beatrice on that snowy Christmas Eve in 1877, was preserved and maintained by the family. It became a kind of shrine, a place where Norton descendants would go to feel connected to their history, to remember the love story that had started it all. Inside the cabin, hung above the fireplace where Daniel had built that first life-saving fire, was a simple wooden plaque that one of their great-grandchildren had carved. It read, "Here is where love began. Daniel Norton found Beatrice Davies alone in a Christmas storm, December 24, 1877. He gave her a home, a holiday, and a life full of love. From their union came 3 children, 14 grandchildren, and a legacy that will live forever. Remember them, honor them, love like they loved." And that is exactly what the Norton family did, generation after generation. They loved fiercely and completely. They welcomed strangers with open hearts. They believed in second chances and the power of compassion. They built lives full of purpose and meaning, just like Daniel and Beatrice had done. The story of a lonely cowboy who found a woman alone on Christmas and gave her a home and a holiday became more than just a family story. It became a testament to the transformative power of love, to the idea that even in the darkest moments, hope can be found, that even the most broken people can be made whole again through connection and care. Daniel and Beatrice Norton had started with nothing but each other and had built an empire of love that lasted far beyond their own lives. Their story lived on in every Norton who chose compassion over cruelty, love over loneliness, hope over despair. It lived on in the land they had worked, in the house they had built, in the family they had created. And on snowy Christmas Eves, when the Norton family gathered together at the ranch, someone would always tell the story again. They would talk about the snowstorm and the desperate woman and the cowboy who chose to help instead of riding on. They would talk about the love that grew from that simple act of kindness, about the family that resulted, about the legacy that endured. The children would listen with wide eyes, the same way James and Elizabeth and Thomas had listened all those years ago. They would ask questions and marvel at the idea of their great-great-great-grandparents meeting in such dramatic circumstances. And they would understand, even the youngest of them, that they were part of something special, something that had started with an act of mercy on a cold winter night and had grown into something beautiful and lasting. The Norton Ranch stood strong well into the 20th century and beyond, a testament to what Daniel and Beatrice had built. The land prospered, the family grew, and the love that had started it all never faded. Every generation added to the legacy, but they never forgot where it began. In the small cemetery on the Norton property, Daniel and Beatrice's graves were always well tended, always covered in fresh flowers. Their descendants made sure of that. It was a way of honoring them, of thanking them for the sacrifice and love and hard work that had made all their lives possible. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right, people claimed they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old cabin, holding hands and watching the sunset. Whether it was really the spirits of Daniel and Beatrice or just tricks of light and shadow, no one could say for certain. But everyone agreed that if any love was strong enough to transcend death itself, it would be theirs. The story of Daniel Norton and Beatrice Davies Norton became the foundation upon which an entire family built their identity. It taught them about resilience in the face of hardship, about the importance of helping those in need, about the incredible things that can happen when two people choose to face the world together instead of alone. From that one snowy Christmas Eve in 1877, when a lonely cowboy found a desperate woman and made the choice to help her instead of riding on, came decades of love, generations of family, and a legacy that would endure as long as there were Nortons to tell the tale. Daniel had been right when he told Beatrice that her past did not have to define her future. She had been Beatrice Davies, a frightened woman running from an abusive husband. But she became Bella Norton, beloved wife and mother, respected member of the community, the heart of a family that would grow to include hundreds of people over the generations. And Daniel, who had been a lonely cowboy with nothing but bad memories and an empty cabin, became the patriarch of a thriving family, a successful rancher, a man whose name was spoken with respect and affection long after he was gone. Their story was proof that it is never too late for a second chance, that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the simplest acts of human kindness. Daniel Norton found a woman alone on Christmas, and he gave her a home and a holiday. In return, she gave him a reason to live again, a family to love, and a happiness he had thought was lost to him forever. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged in hardship and tenderness, and lasting far beyond the natural span of two human lives. It was a story of rescue and redemption, of second chances and new beginnings, of two broken people who found each other and became whole. And it all started with one choice, one moment of compassion on a snowy Christmas Eve, when Daniel Norton decided that the woman lying in the snow mattered more than his own comfort or safety, and that her life was worth saving no matter what it cost him. That single decision changed everything, not just for Daniel and Beatrice, but for everyone who came after them. Their love was the foundation, strong and true and unshakable. Everything else was built on that. And as long as there were people who remembered their story, who told it to their children and grandchildren, who understood the power of love to transform lives and create legacies, Daniel and Beatrice Norton would never truly be gone. They would live on, forever young, forever in love, forever the cowboy and the woman he found in the snow, who together built something beautiful out of nothing but hope and determination, and an unshakable belief in each other.